I've always been the type to take risks, but this one felt different. Let me explain. About 6 years ago, I was working a 9-to-5 job in corporate America. My position wasn't exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. I was a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company. I worked with a small team, but the work was repetitive, the atmosphere was stagnant, and I found myself just going through the motions. I wasn't fulfilled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting my time. But here's the kicker. I was comfortable. I had a steady paycheck, health insurance, and a 401k plan. I wasn't unhappy. I was just bored. During the first few years of my career, I had worked hard, climbed the ladder a bit, and learned a ton about marketing strategies and consumer behavior. However, as time passed, I started feeling disconnected from my job. I realized I had dreams I wasn't pursuing, passions that were being suppressed, and an itch for something more. I wanted to build something of my own, to be my own boss, and to create a business that would have a real impact. I had always been interested in fitness and health, but I never considered it as a viable business opportunity until one day, my best friend Sarah, who worked as a personal trainer, casually mentioned that she had been thinking about launching an online fitness coaching business. The idea stuck in my mind. I started researching the fitness industry, learning about online coaching, and discovering how people were building successful businesses in this space. The more I dug into it, the more excited I became. The turning point came when I was on vacation with some friends. I woke up early one morning and went for a run by the beach, as I often did when I traveled. I was listening to a podcast about entrepreneurship, and they were interviewing a guy who had started an online business with just a small investment. He talked about how he had quit his 9-to-5, taken a risk, and eventually built something that allowed him to live life on his own terms. As I was running, I thought to myself, why can't that be me? I had the skills. I had the passion. I had the drive, but I didn't have the safety net. The fear of failure was real. I was making good money at my job. I had a stable career, and giving that up felt like a huge gamble. Still, something in my gut told me I had to take that leap. I was terrified, but I knew it was the only way to find out if I could truly build something meaningful. I decided to quit my job. When I handed in my resignation letter, my colleagues thought I was crazy. Some of them didn't understand why I'd leave a solid career for something as uncertain as starting a business. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling anymore. I had to try. I had to give it my all. I didn't have a clear plan at first. I knew I wanted to create an online fitness business, but I wasn't entirely sure what that would look like. At the time, I didn't have much of a following on social media, no client base, and no experience in running a business. But I wasn't about to let that stop me. I started small. I used the savings I had accumulated over the years to fund my new venture, and I began working from my kitchen table. I invested in a website, created a social media presence, and started offering personalized coaching to friends and family. The first few months were tough. I spent countless hours working on the business, creating content, engaging with potential clients, and figuring out how to market my services effectively. The money I was making barely covered my expenses, but I was determined to keep going. Then, a breakthrough moment happened. I partnered with Sarah, my best friend who had been a personal trainer. She was an expert in fitness, and I brought my marketing skills to the table. Together, we created a fitness program that combined my marketing knowledge and her expertise in training. We launched a 12-week online fitness challenge. We used social media to promote it, and I poured everything I had into marketing the program. It was our first real product launch. To our surprise, people actually signed up. Slowly but surely, we started gaining momentum. Clients began getting results, and they started referring their friends to our program. We were getting positive feedback, and the word-of-mouth marketing was working in our favor. What had started as a side project turned into something bigger than we ever imagined. But the real game changer came when we introduced a subscription model for our fitness coaching. Instead of charging clients up front for a fixed program, we created a monthly membership where they could access ongoing coaching, personalized plans, and regular check-ins. The membership model allowed us to build a steady stream of income, and as we added more members, the business began to grow exponentially. I'll be honest, it wasn't easy. We faced countless setbacks along the way. There were technical issues with our website, complaints about the quality of content, and the constant struggle to find new clients. But every obstacle made us stronger. We learned from our mistakes, refined our approach, and found ways to improve our offerings. By the end of the first year, we had turned our small fitness business into a full-time operation. I was no longer working from my kitchen table. We rented an office space, hired additional staff, and began collaborating with influencers in the fitness industry. Our social media following grew, and the business became more sustainable. I was finally making more money than I had in my corporate job, and I was living life on my terms. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. I went from being a corporate employee who felt trapped in a dead-end job to running a successful online business that's grown beyond my wildest expectations. What's even more incredible is that I'm now able to help others achieve the same freedom I found. I've worked with dozens of aspiring entrepreneurs who want to start their own online businesses, and I love helping them turn their dreams into reality. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that fear of failure is the biggest obstacle holding most people back. I could have stayed in my comfortable job for the rest of my life, but I would have missed out on the opportunity to build something truly meaningful. I'm not saying entrepreneurship is for everyone, but I do believe that if you have a passion and a vision, you owe it to yourself to at least try. I don't regret taking that leap of faith for a second. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I had always been the kind of person who loved working with my hands. Ever since I was a kid, I had an unexplainable urge to take things apart, fix them, and try to understand how they worked. My parents were a bit concerned at first, but after I managed to repair our old toaster and save them the cost of buying a new one, they realized it wasn't just a phase. I grew up in a modest neighborhood, and although my family wasn't wealthy, we were comfortable. My parents owned a small but successful local bakery, which they ran with the help of a few employees. I worked there on weekends and after school, helping with deliveries, setting up for customers, and of course, learning how to bake. While I was grateful for the lessons on hard work and the importance of taking care of customers, I always felt like there was more out there for me. The bakery was their dream, not mine. In high school, I became fascinated by technology. I spent countless hours online, watching YouTube videos, reading blogs, and learning about everything from coding to 3D printing. I knew that someday I would do something big in tech. But at that time, I didn't know exactly what that was. It wasn't until I graduated that I finally made the decision to pursue a degree in computer engineering. College was a whole different world. For the first time, I felt surrounded by people who were as passionate about technology as I was. I made some great friends, and together, we spent countless late nights in the lab, working on projects, coding, and sharing ideas. It was during one of these late-night sessions that the idea for my startup was born. I had been tinkering with building a mobile app that could help people track their daily habits. It seemed like something simple enough at the time, but as I delved deeper into it, I realized it was more than just a side project. It was an opportunity to create something that could actually help people. I spent the next few months obsessively working on the app. I didn't have much money, so I used my student loan to hire a freelance developer to help me with the coding I couldn't manage on my own. The first prototype was a mess. The design was clunky, the user interface was confusing, and the app crashed constantly. But I was undeterred. I knew it had potential, and I was committed to making it work. After months of late nights, coding, and user feedback, I finally had a version of the app that I felt comfortable launching. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I remember the day I launched it like it was yesterday. I had no marketing budget, no investors, and no real support network, but I posted about it on Reddit and a few other forums I frequented. To my surprise, people actually started downloading it. Slowly at first, but steadily, the number of users began to grow. What followed was a whirlwind year of hustle, sleepless nights, and constant learning. The app wasn't making much money initially, but I kept improving it, adding new features, and engaging with the community of users who were already on board. Every time I received a message from a user telling me how the app had helped them stay on track with their goals, I felt a surge of motivation to keep pushing forward. Eventually, things started to pick up. I managed to secure a small investment from an angel investor who had a background in tech startups. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to allow me to quit my day job and work on the app full-time. It felt like a dream come true, but I soon realized that running a startup wasn't as glamorous as I had imagined. There were endless meetings with investors, pressure to scale the product, and constant anxiety about whether or not we would make it. But through it all, I kept pushing forward. The app continued to grow, and I began to hire a small team of developers, designers, and marketers to help me take it to the next level. We started getting attention from larger tech blogs, and before long, we were featured in some of the biggest app stores. The number of downloads skyrocketed, and with it, the revenue. By the time I turned 30, the app had gone viral. We were making six figures a month, and I had a growing team of dedicated people working with me. My life had completely changed. I went from being a college student working on a passion project to running a successful tech company. But despite the success, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had achieved all of the things I had dreamed of, but I wasn't happy. The stress, the constant pressure to perform, and the feeling of being stuck in a never-ending cycle of work had taken a toll on me. I had become so focused on growing the business that I had lost sight of why I started it in the first place. One night, after another long day of meetings and decision-making, I sat alone in my office, staring at the screen. I had built something incredible, but it had come at the cost of my well-being. That's when I realized that I needed to take a step back and reassess what I truly wanted. I took some time off to travel, reconnect with my family, and focus on my health. It was during this time that I had a breakthrough. I realized that success wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about balance, fulfillment, and doing work that aligned with my values. I made the decision to scale back the company and focus on creating a more sustainable business model that allowed for personal growth and well-being for everyone involved. I learned that the entrepreneurial journey isn't just about hustle and grinding. It's about finding joy in the process, taking care of yourself, and staying grounded. Running a business is hard, but it's also one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. Today, the app is still growing, but I'm no longer consumed by the pressure to make it bigger and better. I've learned to enjoy the ride and appreciate the people who have helped me along the way. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success isn't always what it seems. It's not just about the destination, but about the journey and the lessons you learn along the way. I was just an average guy with big dreams and a lot of hustle. Growing up in a small town, I always felt like the world had more to offer than what was within arm's reach. From a young age, I had this hunger to build something that was my own. My family didn't have much. My dad worked at the local factory, and my mom did part-time jobs. But both of them always told me that hard work and determination could take you places. I didn't know where exactly that would take me, but I knew it had to be more than the small-town life I knew. My journey started at the age of 21. I had just graduated from college with a degree in business. Like most people in my shoes, I thought the world was my oyster. But reality hit hard the day I realized I wasn't going to get hired at any of the big-name companies I'd applied to. I sent out hundreds of resumes, but the replies were few and far between. The few interviews I had always ended with a polite thanks, but no thanks. I was left feeling frustrated and unsure of what to do next. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my laptop, trying to figure out what went wrong. That's when I stumbled upon an article about a guy who built $1 million business from scratch, selling products online. It sounded like a pipe dream, but something about it clicked. I didn't have a lot of money to invest in a business, but I had time, and I had determination. I knew I could give it a shot. With my savings of just $500, I started researching e-commerce. I had no technical skills, no coding experience or graphic design background, but I figured there had to be a way around that. I started with dropshipping. It seemed like the easiest way to sell products without holding inventory, which was crucial given my budget. I spent weeks learning about product research, Facebook ads, and how to create a simple online store. I felt overwhelmed, but at the same time, I was excited. I remember my first sale like it was yesterday, $17.95 for a phone case. I was on top of the world. For the first few months, it felt like nothing was working. I was spending money on ads, testing products, and tweaking my website, but the sales were minuscule. I kept reading success stories of people who made millions, but it seemed like I was stuck in a loop of failure. My friends and family kept asking me why I didn't just get a regular job and stop wasting my time. It would have been easy to quit, but something in me kept pushing forward. I wasn't ready to give up on my dream. After nearly 6 months of frustration, something clicked. I had a breakthrough with a product, a portable blender. I had been testing all sorts of products, but this one stood out. I could target fitness enthusiasts, health-conscious people, and people who loved smoothies. I refined my Facebook ads and got more specific with my audience targeting. I didn't just want random people to see my ads. I wanted to reach people who were actively looking for products like mine. I spent the next month perfecting my campaign. I ran ad after ad, tweaking the images, the copy, the targeting. And then, one day, it happened. I woke up to 20 orders, then 30, then 50. My phone kept buzzing with notifications. It felt unreal, like I was living in a dream. My sales skyrocketed from a handful of dollars to thousands. By the end of that month, I had made over $10,000 in profit. It was the first time I felt like I was actually building something real. I could see the potential. I invested every dollar back into the business, scaling the ads, hiring freelancers to help with customer service, and even getting a better website design. It was all hands on deck, and I knew this was my chance. By the time I hit the 6-month mark, my business had grown so much that I was able to quit my job and focus on it full time. But it wasn't smooth sailing from there. As my business grew, so did the challenges. I had to deal with suppliers who couldn't meet deadlines, customers who demanded refunds, and the constant pressure to stay ahead of the competition. I learned quickly that success doesn't come without its fair share of problems. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in responsibilities, but I refused to let it break me. Around this time, I decided to scale even further. I started creating my own branded products instead of relying solely on dropshipping. This move required a larger investment, but I knew it was the right step. I found a reliable supplier who could create custom products with my branding. The first batch arrived, and I remember holding the product in my hands for the first time. It was real. My brand was real. I launched my branded line with a small campaign, and the response was overwhelming. Sales were steady, and the feedback from customers was incredible. But as the business grew, so did the pressure. I had to hire more people, social media managers, a customer support team, and even a fulfillment center to handle the growing volume of orders. The financial stress was immense, and I had to make some tough decisions. But with the support of my team, I managed to navigate through it. Looking back now, I'm grateful for the sleepless nights, the countless failures, and the overwhelming doubt. It all paid off. Today, I run a thriving e-commerce business that generates multiple six figures annually. I don't have to wake up to a boss telling me what to do, and I don't have to deal with the soul-crushing grind of a 9-to-5 job anymore. The road wasn't easy, but it was worth every ounce of effort I put into it. I'll never forget those first few months when I felt like quitting every single day. But what I've learned is that the difference between success and failure is the willingness to keep going when things get tough. It's the perseverance that gets you through the rough patches, the ability to stay focused on your goals, and the belief that, eventually, you'll make it. Today, I spend my time mentoring other entrepreneurs and helping them avoid the mistakes I made early on. If I can do it, anyone can. It's all about finding something you're passionate about, staying focused, and pushing through the hardest parts. There's no magic formula for success, but if you keep at it, you'll get there. I was 25 when I decided to start my own business. I'd been working as a software engineer for about 3 years, fresh out of college, and to be honest, I hated it. The whole 9-to-5 grind, the endless meetings, the lack of creative freedom, it was driving me nuts. I knew I wanted more for myself, but I wasn't exactly sure what that more was. My salary was decent for my age, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting my life doing something I didn't care about. One night, I was scrolling through Reddit, like most people do, and came across a post in the entrepreneurship subreddit. The post was about someone who had started their own business selling custom t-shirts and had turned it into a 6-figure income. I don't know why, but that one post triggered something in me. I'd always had a knack for design, and I knew a thing or two about e-commerce, but it had never occurred to me to combine those things into a business. I spent the next few days obsessing over it. I started researching everything: dropshipping, print-on-demand services, marketing, branding, you name it. I even started designing a logo in Photoshop. But there was one problem: I had no money. I had enough saved up for rent, food, and bills for the next few months, but I didn't have any extra cash to invest in a business, especially one I wasn't even sure would work. I had student loans and other financial obligations, so taking a loan or borrowing money from family wasn't really an option. But I refused to let that stop me. I figured the best way to get started was to work with what I already had. I could launch a simple e-commerce store without any major investment. I started with a website, using Shopify's free trial to build out a store. I used the free images that came with the print-on-demand platform, and I found a few suppliers that offered decent quality t-shirts. I didn't need inventory, and the only thing I needed to invest in was my time and energy. The first design I launched was a simple one, a minimalistic logo with a funny quote about coding. It was something I would wear, and I thought other people might enjoy it too. I didn't expect much at first. In fact, I didn't even tell anyone about the store. I was too embarrassed to admit that I was trying something so basic. But after launching, I set up social media profiles, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and started posting a few times a day. I used a combination of free content, memes, and some of my designs to get the word out. At first, nothing happened. I got a few likes here and there, but no sales. I was frustrated, but I kept at it. About 2 weeks into it, I got my first order. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. I remember refreshing my Shopify dashboard and seeing that first new order notification. It felt like the greatest achievement of my life. But then reality set in. I had to deliver. I spent hours making sure the order was processed correctly, the shirt was printed with the right design, and the shipping was done properly. It was a lot of work, but I was determined. The next few months were a roller coaster. Some days, I would get 0 orders. Other days, I'd get a few. I spent more time tweaking my website, adjusting my marketing, and learning about paid advertising. I didn't have a huge budget for ads, but I was able to get a few sales by running Instagram and Facebook ads for as little as $5 a day. It wasn't much, but it was something. And slowly, things started to pick up. By month 4, I'd made enough to cover my rent and bills, which felt like a huge win. But it wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about building something real. I had customers now, people who were actually wearing my designs. Some of them left reviews, others posted pictures of themselves in the t-shirts. It was surreal. I was getting recognition for something I created from scratch. And that fueled me to keep going. Around the 6-month mark, things started to get serious. I wasn't a millionaire, but I was making enough to justify quitting my day job. I had a steady stream of orders coming in, and I was doing everything myself, designing new products, handling customer service, processing orders. I had learned how to manage a business and how to market it, and I was getting better at it every day. But it wasn't easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, days when I didn't know if I could keep up with everything. I had no support system, no mentor, no one to guide me. It was all on me. But the turning point came when I invested in my first email marketing course. I'd been hesitant to dive into email marketing before, but I knew it could help me grow my business. I learned how to build an email list, how to write engaging emails, and how to turn subscribers into loyal customers. It wasn't long before I saw the results. My sales started to increase, and I was able to create repeat customers who kept coming back for more. It was like I'd unlocked a new level in my business. By the end of the first year, I had quit my day job, and I was working on my business full-time. It was a huge relief, but also a bit scary. I was now responsible for everything: my income, my work schedule, and my growth. But I was also proud. I had built something out of nothing. A year ago, I was sitting in a cubicle, frustrated and uninspired, and now I had my own brand, my own customers, and my own future in my hands. Now, 2 years into this journey, my business has grown more than I ever imagined. I've hired a small team to help with fulfillment, marketing, and customer service. I've expanded my product line, adding custom mugs, phone cases, and hats. I've also scaled my marketing efforts, working with influencers and running large-scale ad campaigns. My revenue has increased by over 300%, and I've been able to invest back into the business, buying new equipment and software to streamline everything. But more than that, I'm happy. I'm doing something I love, something I've built with my own hands, and it's only getting bigger. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned along the way. There were so many moments when I wanted to quit, when I thought it was all too much. But I didn't. I kept pushing forward, one small step at a time. And now, I can say with confidence that I've built a business that I'm proud of. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: start with what you have, and don't be afraid to fail. You'll learn more from your failures than your successes. Keep pushing, keep adapting, and eventually, you'll get to where you want to be. But don't expect overnight success. It takes time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But if you're willing to put in the effort, the rewards are worth it. I started my business in my garage with just a laptop, a desk I found in the trash, and a lot of hope. It was 2013, and I had just dropped out of college. I had a pretty decent part-time job at a local tech store, but I was getting tired of the 9 to 5 grind and the constant feeling that I was stuck. One night, after coming home from another exhausting day at work, I sat on the couch, opened up my laptop, and Googled how to start an online business. To be honest, the idea of starting a business felt like a huge leap. I had no formal business education, no investors, and absolutely no clue what I was doing. But I had a dream. I had an idea for an online store that would sell custom-designed t-shirts. It wasn't a groundbreaking concept, but it was something I could easily start with little upfront cost. So, I started sketching designs. My first few attempts were absolutely terrible. I wasn't an artist by any means, but I figured I could find someone who was. I went on Fiverr and hired a designer to help me with a few concepts. After a few back-and-forth revisions, I finally had a handful of t-shirt designs that I thought looked good enough to sell. I set up a simple Shopify store, which took me about a week to figure out. I didn't have a marketing strategy. I didn't know how to drive traffic to my website, but I was determined. I spent hours researching everything I could about SEO, Facebook ads, and Instagram influencers. I barely slept, but I kept pushing forward. The first month was a disaster. I made a few sales, but the profit margins were tiny, and I quickly realized that shipping costs were eating into my earnings. But I didn't give up. Instead, I started reaching out to small influencers on Instagram, offering them free shirts in exchange for a shout-out. Some agreed, some didn't, but eventually, one of them posted about my shirts, and it went viral. The next day, I had my first flood of orders. It wasn't enough to make me rich, but it was enough to prove that this could work. I fulfilled those orders by hand, packaging each shirt myself, adding a handwritten thank you note to every package, and shipping them out from my small garage. I was up late every night, sometimes until 3 a.m., making sure everything was perfect. As the orders came in, I started to see a pattern. The designs that were quirky, funny, or had a sense of humor were the ones that sold the best. I decided to focus more on these types of designs and started experimenting with new ideas. I also hired more people, freelance designers, marketers, and eventually someone to handle customer service so I could focus on growing the brand. By 2015, my business had grown from a small side hustle to a legitimate brand. I had moved out of my garage into a small warehouse, and I was hiring full-time employees. We expanded beyond just t-shirts, adding hoodies, mugs, and phone cases to our product line. It wasn't just about selling products anymore. It was about building a brand that people could connect with. Our social media following grew, and we started launching limited edition products that sold out within hours. But despite all the progress, it wasn't always smooth sailing. In 2016, I made a big mistake. I decided to scale too quickly. I took out a small loan to purchase a larger batch of inventory and hired a marketing agency to help with a new ad campaign. I thought I was ready to take on the world, but I quickly realized I wasn't. The marketing campaign didn't perform as expected, and the inventory I had ordered sat unsold. I found myself buried in debt and struggling to keep up with orders. It was a tough year. There were days when I thought I might have to shut everything down. But instead of giving up, I decided to make some tough decisions. I stopped taking on new debt and focused on getting back to basics. I cut back on inventory, focused on our best-selling products, and started spending more time engaging with our customers. It wasn't easy, but within a few months, sales started to pick up again. I paid off my debts, and by 2017, we were back on track. Looking back, that year was one of the most important in the growth of my business. It taught me how to manage money more effectively, how to say no when necessary, and how to pivot when things weren't working. It also reminded me that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a long, messy journey filled with ups and downs. In 2018, my business hit a major milestone. We surpassed $1 million in revenue for the first time. It was a huge moment for me, especially considering where I had started, alone in my garage with just a laptop. But even with all the success, I knew I had to keep pushing forward. There was always another goal, another challenge to tackle. In 2019, I made the decision to expand internationally. We launched our store in the UK, Canada, and Australia, and quickly realized that the demand for our products was global. It wasn't always easy to manage international orders, but with the help of an amazing team, we made it work. We also started to partner with charities, donating a percentage of each sale to causes we cared about. It felt good to give back, and it helped us build a deeper connection with our customers. By 2021, the brand had grown beyond what I ever could have imagined. We had a team of over 50 people, and our products were sold in multiple countries. I didn't just want to be known for selling t-shirts. I wanted to be known for creating a brand that made people feel something. We worked hard on building a community of like-minded individuals who were passionate about what we stood for. We weren't just selling products anymore. We were selling a lifestyle. Now, in 2025, we've expanded into multiple product categories and have built an online presence that reaches millions of people. Our focus has shifted from just growth to creating a sustainable, impactful company. We've partnered with other brands, hosted events, and even started our own podcast, sharing stories of entrepreneurship, resilience, and creativity. When I look back on where I started, it's hard to believe how far we've come. There were times when I didn't think it was possible, when I thought about giving up. But I kept going, kept learning, kept failing forward. And now, I get to do something I love every single day. I get to wake up and work on something I'm passionate about, something that started with just a simple idea in my head and a determination to make it happen. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, my advice is this: start. Just start. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel ready. You'll never be fully prepared, but the experience you gain along the way will be invaluable. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And remember, failure is part of the process. It's not about how many times you fall. It's about how many times you get back up. If you're willing to put in the work, the long nights, the constant learning, and the sacrifice, you'll find your way. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and success doesn't come with a set timeline. But if you keep going, one step at a time, it'll come. And when it does, you'll look back and be amazed at what you've built. The journey continues, but I'm proud of how far we've come. And I'm excited for what's next. I remember the day I realized that my dreams of building a successful business weren't going to be handed to me. It was a Saturday morning in 2018, and I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of unpaid invoices. The weight of the world was on my shoulders, and the bills seemed to mock me. I had been running my small graphic design agency for about 2 years, and it felt like I was always one step away from either succeeding or crashing and burning. Let me take you back a bit. I'd always been passionate about design. As a kid, I was the one sketching in notebooks instead of playing outside. My parents would buy me new sketchbooks and pencils because they knew I had talent, though they didn't really understand what I could do with it. I went to college for design, and by the time I graduated, I was confident I could build something big. In 2016, I took the plunge and decided to start my own business. I was working full-time at a small design studio while freelancing on the side. The freedom of freelancing was exciting, picking my own projects, setting my own rates, but it was also exhausting. I was doing everything myself, handling clients, designing, accounting, marketing, you name it. After months of balancing both, I decided to quit my job and go full-time with the business. I was ready to build something bigger, something that could sustain me long-term. At first, things seemed to go well. I got a few big clients, mostly small businesses needing logos and branding. I even managed to hire a part-time assistant to handle administrative tasks. I felt like I was on the right path. I had dreams of building a boutique agency, a team of designers, working with major clients, and eventually being able to take long vacations without worrying about finances. But the reality hit me harder than I expected. I quickly learned that scaling a business wasn't as simple as just getting more clients. As my client list grew, so did my workload. The assistant I hired wasn't enough to help with all the new administrative tasks, and soon I found myself drowning in emails, meetings, and revisions. I started working late into the night, barely sleeping, and my health began to deteriorate. The stress was overwhelming, but I pushed through, believing that I just had to work harder to make it all work. It didn't take long for cracks to appear in the business. I wasn't paying enough attention to my finances, and soon enough, the invoices I hadn't followed up on started piling up. My clients, who had once been thrilled with my work, began dragging their feet on payments. I was desperate for cash flow, but I also didn't want to risk losing clients by being too pushy. I started working on projects that I didn't really care about just to make ends meet. One Saturday, after a week of sleepless nights, I woke up to find my inbox flooded with overdue payments and angry clients. I hadn't been properly managing my cash flow, and now I was facing the consequences. I didn't know if I could keep going, but I had no choice. I couldn't quit, not when I had invested so much time, money, and energy into the business. That was when I made a decision. I would either figure this out or lose everything. I began by restructuring my business. I hired a financial advisor, something I had been avoiding because I thought it was too expensive. She helped me set up a proper invoicing system and gave me a crash course in cash flow management. I also hired a full-time operations manager to handle the back end of the business, allowing me to focus on design and client relations. My new hires weren't cheap, but they were exactly what I needed to scale without breaking down under the pressure. I knew that I couldn't keep running my business the way I had been. I had to change my mindset, too. I started learning about business strategy, marketing, and leadership. I joined online courses and read books by entrepreneurs who had gone through the same struggles. I realized that being a business owner wasn't just about being good at what you do. It was about creating systems, building relationships, and staying disciplined, even when things got tough. In the months that followed, things slowly started turning around. My cash flow improved as I became more diligent with invoicing and follow-ups. I landed a few large projects from clients who appreciated the value I brought to the table. I even started attracting higher-paying clients, the kind that didn't haggle over prices and valued the work I did. My team grew stronger as we streamlined our processes and improved our communication. I felt like I was finally getting a grip on this business thing. By 2019, the company was stable, and I could finally breathe. But it didn't feel like success yet. I was still hungry. I wanted to scale even further, to go from a small business to something that could have a lasting impact on the industry. So, I shifted my focus to building a brand that stood for innovation, creativity, and quality. I invested in online marketing and began building a strong social media presence. I started attending networking events, meeting people who could help me expand my reach, and learning from others who had built empires from the ground up. At the same time, I focused on improving my team's skills. I brought in senior designers, marketing experts, and client managers, and I made sure that each member of the team had the opportunity to grow professionally. We held monthly workshops, team-building activities, and brainstormed ideas for new services we could offer our clients. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, something that we could all be proud of. Fast forward to 2023, and the company I built from the ground up has grown into a mid-sized agency with clients across multiple industries. We've been featured in industry publications, and I've spoken at a few design conferences about my journey. The business is profitable, and I can take vacations without constantly checking my email. I've also started mentoring other entrepreneurs, sharing what I've learned over the years. It's a far cry from the stressed-out designer I was in 2018, sitting at that kitchen table wondering if I was about to lose everything. I'll be honest, there are still tough days. There are still moments when I doubt myself, when I think about how much further I have to go. But looking back at how far I've come, I'm proud of the journey. It wasn't easy, but I've learned that persistence, discipline, and the right mindset are the keys to turning a dream into a reality. So, if you're out there struggling with your own business, know this. It's going to be tough. You'll hit roadblocks, you'll feel like giving up, and you'll wonder if it's worth it. But if you keep pushing, keep learning, and keep evolving, you might just look back one day and realize you've built something bigger than you ever imagined. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in a small, quiet town, the kind where everyone knows everyone's business. My parents were hardworking, salt-of-the-earth people who believed in the value of a stable job and a predictable life. My dad worked in construction, and my mom ran a small thrift shop. They always said, do well in school, get a job, and live a simple, content life. I, on the other hand, hated the idea of living a simple life. I didn't want to follow the same path my parents had, and from a young age, I found myself drawn to the idea of doing something more, something different. I didn't have any particular entrepreneurial role model growing up. In fact, I didn't even know what entrepreneurship truly meant at the time. But there was something about the idea of building something from the ground up that fascinated me. After high school, I decided to attend college in the city. I majored in business, mainly because it seemed like the most logical path for someone who didn't want to go into medicine, law, or teaching. It wasn't until my sophomore year that I had my aha moment. I was sitting in a lecture hall, listening to a professor talk about the importance of innovation and how some of the most successful companies started from the simplest ideas. It was that moment when I realized that I could be the one to create something new. It wasn't about following someone else's footsteps. It was about forging my own path. By the time I graduated, I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do, but no real plan. I moved back in with my parents to save money and figure things out. My friends were all heading off to corporate jobs, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something different. I spent the next few months reading everything I could about business, startups, and entrepreneurship. I watched countless TED Talks, listened to podcasts, and devoured books on innovation and how to start a business. Then one night, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across an ad for a dropshipping course. At first, I dismissed it as just another get-rich-quick scheme. But something about the ad caught my attention, so I clicked. The more I learned about dropshipping, the more intrigued I became. It seemed like a low-risk way to test out my entrepreneurial instincts without having to invest thousands of dollars up front. I spent the next few weeks devouring every piece of information I could find about dropshipping. I spent hours on YouTube, reading blogs, and joining online forums. I learned about e-commerce platforms, suppliers, and how to market products effectively. My plan was to start small, sell a few products, and see where it went. One thing I knew for sure was that I didn't want to sell anything generic. I wanted a niche that stood out, something that had potential but wasn't already flooded with competition. After brainstorming for a while, I stumbled upon the idea of selling eco-friendly products. The environment was something I had always cared about, and I knew there was a growing demand for sustainable alternatives to everyday products. I found a supplier that offered biodegradable phone cases and eco-friendly bags, which seemed like a good fit. I created a website, set up a Shopify store, and started marketing my products on Instagram and Facebook. The first few weeks were rough. I didn't get many sales, and I spent a lot of time tweaking my website and ads to see what worked. I felt like I was constantly spinning my wheels, unsure if this was going to work at all. But then, something clicked. I started getting a few orders here and there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. I reinvested every penny I made into the business, buying more inventory, improving my website, and experimenting with new marketing strategies. Slowly, my sales started to increase, and the little wins kept me motivated. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. I ran into issues with shipping delays, and I struggled to keep up with customer service. I had to learn how to handle returns, refunds, and unhappy customers. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed, like I had bitten off more than I could chew. But instead of quitting, I used every challenge as a learning opportunity. One of the biggest turning points came when I hired my first employee. I couldn't keep up with the workload on my own anymore, and I realized I needed help if I wanted to grow the business. I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and administrative tasks, which freed up my time to focus on marketing and expanding my product line. That was when I truly felt like my business was becoming something real. Over the next few months, I expanded my product range to include reusable water bottles, bamboo toothbrushes, and other eco-friendly products. I started collaborating with influencers who shared my passion for sustainability, and my brand began to gain traction. I also invested in paid ads and optimized my website for better conversion rates. With every small success, my confidence grew, and I began to see a future for my business. However, just as things were starting to pick up, I hit another setback. I received an email from my supplier informing me that they would no longer be able to fulfill my orders due to some production issues. This sent me into a panic. I had built my entire business around their products, and now I had to find a new supplier quickly. The stress was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't let this setback destroy everything I had worked for. I spent weeks researching new suppliers, contacting manufacturers, and testing different products. It took time, but I eventually found a new supplier that offered even better products and faster shipping times. My business didn't miss a beat, and once the new products arrived, sales picked up even more. As the years went by, my business continued to grow. I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment. I expanded my team, hiring more employees to handle the growing demand. I eventually built a fully remote team of people who shared my vision and passion for sustainability. The business was no longer just a side hustle, it was my full-time career. Today, my brand is one of the top eco-friendly e-commerce stores in the market, and we've expanded into international shipping. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The journey hasn't been easy, and there were countless times when I wanted to give up. But I'm proud of what I've built, and I know that every challenge I faced made me a better entrepreneur. Starting a business isn't glamorous, and there's no magic formula for success. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, the rewards can be incredible. If I could go back and give my younger self one piece of advice, it would be to never doubt my ability to succeed. The road is long, but the view from the top is worth it. I never thought I'd be one of those overnight success stories. I always thought those people had some secret formula or lucky break. But the truth is, it all came down to persistence, a bit of luck, and a whole lot of trial and error. I grew up in a small town, one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and the idea of leaving to do something bigger seemed almost impossible. My family wasn't wealthy, but they always taught me the importance of hard work. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a schoolteacher. They instilled in me the values of being self-sufficient and never relying on anyone but yourself. After high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't one of those kids who knew they wanted to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. I had no specific passion. I decided to go to college to figure it out. But honestly, I spent most of those years just trying to keep up with the workload and barely passing my classes. In the back of my mind, I always had this nagging thought. Is this really it? Is this what I'm meant to do? It wasn't until after I graduated that I realized I wasn't cut out for the 9 to 5 grind. I'd worked a few internships during college, mostly just to make ends meet. And I hated them. I couldn't stand the idea of sitting in an office all day, following someone else's rules. I had this need to create something of my own, but I didn't know where to start. I moved back in with my parents for a while, trying to figure out my next steps. At that point, I was seriously considering starting my own business. But I had no idea what kind of business to start. I didn't have a lot of money, and I definitely didn't have any experience in running a business. One evening, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across a post from a small business owner who was selling custom t-shirts. The idea was simple, but it struck me. I'd always been into graphic design and had a decent skill set when it came to creating digital art. So, I thought, why not combine my love for design with the idea of creating something people could wear? And just like that, I had my first business idea, custom t-shirts. I knew I needed a website to sell my designs, but I had no clue how to build one. I was good at design, but coding was a whole different beast. So, I started researching and learning how to create a simple e-commerce site. It took months to figure it out. I watched YouTube videos, read blog posts, and spent countless hours tinkering with the design. The whole process was frustrating, but I was determined. I had no other option. Eventually, I launched my website. It wasn't perfect. The design was basic, and the user experience wasn't great, but it worked. I started uploading my designs, and to my surprise, people actually bought them. It wasn't a huge success at first, but it was enough to keep me going. I spent every day trying to improve my products, learning more about marketing and optimizing my website. After a few months, I realized I had to step up my marketing game. I started running Instagram ads, but the results were underwhelming. Then, I tried Facebook ads, and while they weren't a home run, I started seeing some traction. I kept tweaking my campaigns, testing different images, and refining my messaging. Slowly, I started building a small but loyal customer base. But then, the pandemic hit. At first, I was terrified. Like so many other businesses, I saw my sales plummet. The world was shutting down, and people weren't thinking about buying t-shirts. I could have given up, but I didn't. Instead, I pivoted. I realized that people were looking for something more comforting during those uncertain times. So, I launched a line of t-shirts with positive, motivational quotes and designs that reflected the challenges everyone was going through. I also began donating a portion of the profits to COVID relief efforts, which resonated with my audience. The response was incredible. People loved the idea of wearing something that gave them a little hope. Sales began picking up again, and for the first time, I saw real growth. I invested the money I earned back into the business, improving my website and creating more designs. I expanded into other products like hoodies, mugs, and phone cases. As things slowly returned to normal, I realized that I had built something bigger than just a side hustle. I had created a brand. People weren't just buying t-shirts. They were buying into a message of positivity, resilience, and self-expression. Now, for years later, I run a full-fledged online business. I've hired a small team to help with design, marketing, and customer service. My company has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We've even partnered with some influencers who love our designs, and we've expanded into international markets. But it hasn't been easy. There have been countless sleepless nights, moments when I questioned whether I was making the right choice, and times when I felt like giving up. I've made mistakes, big ones. I've spent money on things that didn't work, and I've had to let go of employees who didn't fit with the company's vision. But every mistake has been a lesson. If you told me 5 years ago that I'd be where I am now, I would have laughed. But the truth is, it all started with one simple idea, a willingness to learn, and a commitment to pushing through the tough times. I'm not saying that every day is perfect. There are still challenges, and there are still moments where I doubt myself. But I've learned that success doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from learning how to keep going, even when it feels impossible. Looking back, I don't think I would have changed anything. Every struggle, every setback, and every triumph has led me to where I am today. And while I still don't have all the answers, I'm proud of what I've built and the lessons I've learned along the way. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't give up. Keep learning, keep trying, and most importantly, keep moving forward. It won't happen overnight, but with enough persistence, you can make it happen. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started my journey in entrepreneurship with absolutely no experience, no connections, and no money. It all began in the back room of a small coffee shop where I used to work as a barista. At the time, I was just another 24-year-old college dropout, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The future seemed uncertain, and the only thing that was clear to me was that I didn't want to be stuck in a job that didn't excite me. I had always been fascinated by the idea of owning my own business, but it felt like a distant dream. I didn't have a business degree or any technical skills, and my bank account was perpetually empty. But I had one thing that I was willing to leverage: time. I would stay up late every night, reading books and watching YouTube videos on entrepreneurship, business models, marketing strategies, and finance. The more I learned, the more I realized that the barrier to entry in business wasn't as high as I thought. I didn't need an MBA or a ton of capital to start something meaningful. What I needed was an idea and the courage to act on it. One day, while making espresso shots for a customer, I overheard a conversation between two regulars. They were talking about how they were looking for unique, handmade gifts for a family event. At that moment, it clicked. I had been tinkering with wood and other materials as a hobby, building little trinkets and furniture. I thought, what if I could make personalized, custom wood items and sell them to people looking for unique gifts? I rushed home that night and started sketching designs. I had no real business plan, but I knew I wanted to make high-quality, one-of-a-kind products that people would cherish. The idea was simple: custom wood signs, small furniture pieces, and decorative items. I opened an Etsy shop and uploaded a few photos of the items I had made, hoping for the best. In the beginning, it was a slow grind. I spent every free moment working on new designs and improving my skills. At first, my products barely sold, and when they did, the margins were razor-thin. The materials cost a lot, and I didn't have any efficient tools. But I knew that to succeed, I needed to improve my processes, refine my craft, and find ways to make my products more appealing. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A customer left a glowing review on one of my products, sharing pictures of the custom wood sign they had purchased for their wedding. It was the kind of review that made you feel like all the struggle was worth it. They tagged me on Instagram, and within hours, I saw a spike in traffic to my shop. That moment was a turning point. I realized that word of mouth and social proof could be powerful tools. From that day on, I focused on building a community and encouraging my customers to share their experiences on social media. I began reaching out to influencers in the DIY and home decor space, offering to send them free products in exchange for a shout-out. It was a small investment, but it paid off big time. Slowly, my name started getting recognition. As my customer base grew, I reinvested the profits into better equipment and more materials, improving both the quality and efficiency of my work. By the end of my first year, I was making a steady income. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover my living expenses. I realized that my hobby could be my full-time job. But I wasn't content with just scraping by. I wanted to scale my business. I started researching ways to automate my processes and increase production. I invested in a CNC machine, which allowed me to cut wood more precisely and at a much faster rate than I ever could by hand. I hired a few part-time workers to help with assembly, packaging, and shipping. This allowed me to focus on design and marketing, the parts of the business that I was passionate about. But scaling wasn't easy. My first few attempts to grow were disastrous. I made mistakes, from poor inventory management to failing to properly budget for advertising. There was one month where I spent so much on Facebook ads that I almost ran out of cash. I had to scramble to fulfill orders and figure out how to stay afloat. But those early challenges taught me more than any textbook or business seminar ever could. I began studying my data more carefully, adjusting my marketing strategy, and focusing on the areas that gave me the best return. Slowly, the business began to take off. I started landing larger corporate orders, which provided a significant cash flow boost. I also expanded my product line to include custom furniture and home decor. By the time I hit my second year in business, I had built a solid foundation. The business was generating consistent profits, and I was no longer worried about making rent. I could now pay myself a reasonable salary and even take a few vacations here and there, something I hadn't been able to do for the past few years. But the most fulfilling part of this journey wasn't the money or the growth. It was seeing how my products made people feel. When a customer would share a photo of their custom piece in their home or send me a thank you message, I felt a sense of pride that no amount of money could buy. I had created something that people genuinely loved. Now, 5 years later, my business has expanded beyond just selling custom wood products. I've diversified into several other areas, including a line of eco-friendly home products, digital courses on woodworking, and even a podcast where I share my entrepreneurial journey. I've built a team of incredible people who are just as passionate about the business as I am. We've even moved into a larger warehouse space, and the demand for our products is stronger than ever. Looking back, I realized that my success didn't come from any magical formula. It came from persistence, learning from my mistakes, and constantly improving. I went from being a broke barista with no experience to running a six-figure business. It hasn't always been easy, and there were times when I doubted myself, but the key was always pushing forward, even when it seemed like nothing was working. I'm not saying I have all the answers, or that entrepreneurship is a smooth ride. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need to have everything figured out to start. You just need the courage to take that first step, and then the willingness to keep going, even when it feels impossible. Every mistake, every failure, and every moment of doubt is just a part of the journey. And if you're willing to keep learning, keep improving, and keep working, you'll eventually get where you want to go. I started my business with nothing but a few dollars in my pocket and a dream. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and opportunities were few and far between. My parents weren't wealthy, and the idea of starting a business seemed like something only rich people did. But I always had this feeling that there was more to life than working the same 9 to 5 jobs that my friends and family were stuck in. I wanted to break out of that cycle. In high school, I had a small side hustle, selling custom t-shirts to my classmates. It wasn't much, but it gave me a taste of what it was like to be my own boss. I remember the first time I sold a t-shirt to someone outside my circle of friends. It was a weird feeling, like I had cracked some hidden code, but I knew that wasn't enough to sustain me long term. So, after high school, I started working full-time at a coffee shop, saving every penny I could while I thought about what to do next. Eventually, I figured out that if I wanted to create something bigger, I needed to scale. That's when I decided to take a leap. I wanted to get into e-commerce. The world of online business was booming, and I saw it as a way to reach a global audience. But I didn't have a clue about how to run an online store, let alone market it. So, I spent the next few months teaching myself everything I could about building websites, social media marketing, and the logistics of e-commerce. I didn't have money for fancy courses or mentoring, so I relied on YouTube, free blogs, and trial and error. In the evenings, after work, I'd stay up late learning how to design a website. I got so good at it that I was able to create a professional-looking online store. But the hard part was still ahead, making sales. I launched my e-commerce business with a limited budget. I focused on selling a niche product that I thought had potential. I chose a product I was passionate about, personalized phone cases. Everyone has a phone, and everyone wants something that feels unique to them, right? I remember the night I made my first sale. I couldn't believe it. It was a $25 order, and I felt like a millionaire. But then the reality set in. How do I actually fulfill this order? I spent hours researching suppliers, learning how to print custom designs, and figuring out how to ship it out to the customer. But I was determined. I knew that this was my chance to change my life. For the first few months, sales were slow. I get the occasional order here and there, but it wasn't enough to quit my day job. It felt like I was putting in so much work for very little return. But I kept at it, because I knew that most successful entrepreneurs didn't give up after the first few months of struggle. They kept pushing, even when it seemed like nothing was working. I had to learn that perseverance was just as important as having a great product. I decided to take a risk. I saved up enough money to run paid Facebook ads, something I had heard was key to getting more exposure. I spent $100, which felt like a lot of money for me at the time. But it worked. I remember getting 30 orders from that single ad campaign. My store finally felt like it was picking up some steam. It was small, but it was something. Over the next year, I kept experimenting with different products, marketing strategies, and social media channels. Slowly but surely, I started to build a loyal customer base. I reinvested every penny I made into growing the business. By the end of that first year, I was making a modest profit, and I had finally reached the point where I could quit my day job. The transition from part-time hustler to full-time entrepreneur wasn't easy. There were nights when I was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work required. Customer service, inventory management, product sourcing, fulfillment, everything fell on my shoulders. I had no team, no backup, just me and my laptop. But I loved it. I was building something real, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over my future. As time went on, I hired my first employee, someone who helped me with customer service and social media management. That was a huge turning point. I realized that I couldn't do everything on my own forever. To scale, I needed to delegate tasks and build a team of people I could trust. It was tough at first to let go of certain aspects of the business, but it was necessary for growth. The next few years were a roller coaster. There were highs, like launching new products that flew off the shelves, and lows, like dealing with a major inventory mishap that cost me thousands of dollars. There were times when I thought I might fail, and other times when I felt on top of the world. But each challenge taught me something valuable. I learned the importance of adaptability, risk-taking, and focusing on the customer experience. I also learned that failure wasn't the end, it was part of the journey. There were a few product launches that flopped. I remember one time I ordered 500 units of a new product, thinking it would sell like hotcakes, only to realize that I had completely misjudged the market demand. It was a huge blow to my confidence, but instead of quitting, I took it as an opportunity to pivot. I learned from my mistakes, made adjustments, and moved forward. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. We've expanded into multiple product lines, and we're on track to do 7 figures in revenue this year. I've built a small but talented team of people who are as passionate about the business as I am. And most importantly, I've learned to enjoy the journey. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From that first $25 sale to running a business that supports my entire lifestyle, it's been an incredible ride. But the road was never easy, and I wouldn't have made it without persistence, hard work, and a willingness to fail and learn. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success is built on small wins, countless lessons learned, and never giving up when things get tough. For anyone out there thinking of starting a business, my advice is simple. Start now, keep learning, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. The road ahead will be tough, but if you stick with it, the rewards are worth it. I started my entrepreneurial journey from the most unlikely place, a small, cluttered bedroom in a modest apartment with no money to my name. I didn't come from wealth, and my family wasn't in business. I didn't have a rich uncle or some secret investor ready to back me. But what I did have was a burning desire to build something of my own, to escape the 9-to-5 grind and live life on my own terms. At the time, I was in my mid-20s, working as a low-level marketing assistant at a small digital agency. The job was fine, but it wasn't fulfilling. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, utilities, and the occasional night out with friends, and I felt like I was stuck in a loop. I'd been dreaming of starting my own business for years, but the fear of failure kept holding me back. What if I failed and lost everything? What if I ended up even worse off than I was before? But one thing kept gnawing at me, the idea of working for someone else for the rest of my life. The thought made my stomach churn. So, I decided to take the leap. The first step was finding an idea. It wasn't an easy process. I tried countless business concepts, from opening an e-commerce store to starting a content marketing agency. None of them felt right. I spent weeks brainstorming, researching, and testing ideas, but everything seemed to fall flat. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew that I needed to build something that would fill a gap in the market and bring real value to people. Then, one day, I was reading a Reddit post where someone was complaining about the complexity of getting their website to rank on Google. They were struggling with SEO and couldn't find reliable, simple resources to guide them. This got me thinking, what if I could create an easy-to-follow SEO guide or tool for beginners? I knew that SEO was a big deal, but it was often complex and overwhelming for small business owners and startups. If I could create a simple product that solved this problem, it might just work. I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about SEO. I read blogs, watched tutorials, took courses, and experimented with websites. I became obsessed with understanding the ins and outs of search engine optimization. But there was one problem. I didn't have the technical skills to build a complex SEO tool, and I definitely couldn't afford to hire developers or designers. So, I started small. I created an online course teaching the basics of SEO for beginners, something that would appeal to the small business owners I wanted to help. It wasn't groundbreaking or revolutionary, but it was straightforward, actionable, and accessible. I figured that if people could learn the fundamentals of SEO without feeling overwhelmed, it could be a game changer for them. I launched the course with a simple website, some blog posts, and a few YouTube videos. I didn't have a big email list or any paid advertising budget, but I had one thing going for me: persistence. I reached out to every small business owner I knew, asked friends to share it on social media, and wrote guest posts for small business blogs. Slowly but surely, people started noticing. In the first month, I made just $200. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I reinvested every penny back into the business, upgrading the website, creating better content, and improving the course. I also began offering one-on-one SEO consulting, which brought in a little extra income. It wasn't glamorous, but it was working. Then, something unexpected happened. A well-known blogger in the SEO space reviewed my course on their site, and the traffic to my website exploded. I went from getting a few hundred visitors per month to several thousand. Sales shot up, and within 3 months, I had earned enough to quit my day job. I was officially a full-time entrepreneur. But even then, things weren't perfect. I had left behind the security of a steady paycheck, and I was now fully responsible for my income and livelihood. Every month, I worried about whether or not I'd be able to pay my bills. I worked long hours, sometimes staying up until 3 a.m. to finish a project or respond to emails. I hired a freelancer to help me with customer support, and later, another to assist with content creation. But there was always a sense of instability. However, my business continued to grow. Word of mouth helped, and I invested in building a stronger brand. I started offering more advanced SEO courses, creating downloadable templates and guides, and even launching a subscription service for ongoing SEO advice. I built partnerships with other digital marketers and influencers, which gave me more credibility and access to larger audiences. At the same time, I learned a lot about myself. I realized that being an entrepreneur isn't just about having a great idea. It's about resilience, hard work, and the willingness to keep going even when things aren't going your way. I had to become comfortable with failure and learn to pivot when things weren't working. I had to embrace the discomfort of uncertainty and keep pushing forward even when it felt like I wasn't making progress. Fast forward 3 years, and my business had grown into a thriving, 6-figure company. I had a small team working with me, and we were consistently adding new products and services. I started getting requests for speaking engagements and podcast interviews. My content was being shared by influencers in the SEO space, and I was finally recognized as an expert in the field. But despite the success, I've never forgotten where I started. I still remember the nights spent working alone in my apartment, the fear of failure, and the frustration of not knowing if things would work out. I also remember the moment I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning from it, growing stronger, and pushing through the tough times. Looking back, it feels surreal. I never imagined that a simple idea would turn into a full-blown business. But I also know that the journey isn't over. There's always more to learn, more to achieve, and more ways to help others. And that, for me, is what makes this all worth it. I've learned that the path to success isn't linear. There are always ups and downs, and it takes time. But if you're persistent, work hard, and stay focused on solving real problems, anything is possible. It may not be easy, but if you're passionate and committed, you can build something that not only changes your life but also the lives of others. Now, as I look to the future, I have big plans. I want to expand my company globally, create more educational resources for entrepreneurs, and continue helping small business owners grow their online presence. I also want to give back to the community that helped me get to where I am today. Because if I can do it, anyone can. So, to anyone reading this who's feeling stuck or unsure about starting their own business, take the leap. You won't know where it'll take you, but you'll never get anywhere if you don't try. And even if you fail, you'll have learned something valuable that will help you the next time around. Keep going. The best is yet to come. I was 25 when I decided to quit my corporate job and pursue my dream of owning my own business. It wasn't a rash decision. I had been planning it for months. I hated the 9 to 5 grind, the daily monotony, the long hours, the lack of fulfillment. But there was always that voice in the back of my head telling me I could do something more, something that would make me truly happy. It all started when I stumbled upon an online community of people discussing ways to make passive income. I was deep into the rabbit hole of YouTube videos and blog posts about building an online business, investing, and creating something that could eventually run on autopilot. It sounded too good to be true, but something about it clicked with me. I didn't want to follow the traditional career path anymore. I wanted to create something that would provide me the freedom to travel, work on my own terms, and eventually make money while I slept. But I didn't have any experience in business. I wasn't some tech prodigy or a marketing genius. I didn't have a wealthy family backing me, and I wasn't some investor's dream candidate. I was just an ordinary guy with an idea and a whole lot of determination. So, I started doing what everyone told me to do. I researched. I spent hours and hours learning everything I could about the business world. I read books, watched videos, and followed successful entrepreneurs who shared their journeys. I had no real plan yet, but I knew I wanted to create an online business. I had a passion for fitness, so the idea of building a brand around health and wellness felt right. I wanted to create a product or service that could help people become healthier, while also generating income for me. After a few months of research, I had a vague idea of what I wanted to do: launch an online fitness coaching platform. The idea was simple: offer personalized fitness plans, nutritional advice, and one-on-one coaching through a website. I thought it would be the perfect business. There was a huge market for fitness, and with social media and digital tools, I figured it was easier than ever to connect with clients from anywhere in the world. But there was one problem: I had no idea how to actually build a website, let alone market it. So, I started with the basics. I bought a course on how to create websites and spent weeks learning how to build one from scratch. It was overwhelming at first. I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to quit several times. The technical side of things wasn't easy for me, and I often found myself stuck, Googling how to fix issues that felt like insurmountable obstacles. But I pushed through. Slowly, the website started coming together. I created landing pages, designed the user interface, and filled it with content about fitness and nutrition. I was using free resources to get everything off the ground, and though it was far from perfect, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. I finally had something tangible to show for all the late nights and hard work. Once the website was up, I needed to attract clients. I knew nothing about online marketing, but I was determined to figure it out. I started reading about SEO, social media marketing, and paid ads. I quickly realized that my fitness website wouldn't get much attention without some serious promotion. So, I launched a blog and began writing about fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle. I also started posting on Instagram and YouTube, sharing my own fitness journey, tips, and workouts. It was hard at first, and I felt like I was talking to an empty room, but I kept pushing. After a few months, things started to gain momentum. I began attracting followers on Instagram and YouTube. More and more people were reading my blog. I had a small but dedicated audience, and I started seeing an increase in website traffic. Then came the breakthrough moment. I received my first paying client. It was a huge deal for me. I was no longer just a guy with an idea. I was officially a business owner. The first client came from Instagram. I posted a story about launching my fitness coaching services, and someone reached out asking for help. We worked together for a few months, and they saw significant improvements in their fitness. That success story became the foundation for my business. I used it to market my services, and soon after, I had a steady stream of clients signing up for coaching packages. But I didn't stop there. I knew I needed to expand if I wanted to grow. So I started hiring other trainers to work with clients. I built a small team of like-minded fitness professionals, each specializing in different areas like strength training, yoga, and nutrition. It was difficult to let go of some control, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to scale. Over the next year, my business grew exponentially. I shifted my focus from offering one-on-one coaching to creating group fitness programs and digital products like meal plans and workout programs that could be sold online. I also began to expand my social media presence. My Instagram grew to over 100,000 followers, and I started getting sponsorship deals with fitness brands. But growth came with its own set of challenges. The more clients I had, the more logistical problems arose. Managing a team of trainers, handling customer service, and dealing with the day-to-day tasks of running a business was exhausting. There were weeks where I felt like I was constantly putting out fires. But I refused to give up. To help manage the growing demand, I invested in systems and tools that could automate parts of my business. I used software to manage client bookings, track progress, and handle payments. I also hired a virtual assistant to handle administrative tasks and customer inquiries. This allowed me to focus more on growing the brand and creating content. As the business continued to grow, I started diversifying. I launched a fitness app that allowed users to access workout programs and nutrition plans from their phones. I created a membership platform where people could access exclusive content, including live workout sessions and weekly coaching calls. It was a big risk, but it paid off. The app and membership platform generated passive income, which gave me the financial freedom I had always dreamed of. By the time I was 30, I had built a six-figure business that allowed me to work from anywhere. I had clients from all over the world, and I was living a life I had once only dreamed of. I was traveling, meeting new people, and doing what I loved every single day. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. There were times when I doubted myself, times when I felt like I was failing, and times when I wanted to quit. But every challenge taught me something valuable. I learned the importance of persistence, the value of learning new skills, and the power of taking risks. Now, as I look at my business, I'm proud of what I've built. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If I had listened to the people who told me to stay in my corporate job and play it safe, I would have missed out on the incredible opportunities I've experienced. Instead, I chose to take the leap, and it changed my life forever. I started my business with only $500 in my pocket. No investors, no family loans, just the bare minimum and a dream. Looking back, I don't even know how I had the guts to go for it. I was 25, recently out of college, and frustrated with the idea of a 9-to-5 grind. I had seen the struggles of my parents as they worked their entire lives in corporate jobs, barely scraping by, and it was a reality I refused to accept. I wanted to build something on my own, to create something that could offer me financial freedom, a sense of pride, and control over my own destiny. I didn't know what industry I wanted to dive into, but I knew I had to pick something I was passionate about. I wasn't looking for instant success or a way to get rich overnight. I just wanted to find something that would make me feel fulfilled and allow me to work on my own terms. After weeks of researching, I landed on a niche I had always been interested in: sustainable home products. At the time, it wasn't as big of a trend as it is now, but I saw potential. The environment was on everyone's mind, and people were starting to care more about what they were putting into their homes. I had no prior experience in manufacturing, sourcing, or e-commerce. I was starting from scratch. The first step was creating a website. With the limited funds I had, I spent hours at night learning how to build a simple e-commerce site. It was basic, clunky even, but it worked. I sold my first product, a set of reusable bamboo straws, on a whim. I didn't know if anyone would even buy them, but to my surprise, the first sale came through in less than a week. That was all the motivation I needed. I spent the next few months pushing my products hard on social media, trying to build an audience from scratch. I was working a full-time job at the time, so I would wake up at 5 a.m. to ship orders before heading to the office, then spend my lunch breaks answering customer emails, and finally, I'd come home and work on my business late into the night. There was no work-life balance, just hustle. I remember feeling completely exhausted but also energized in a way I'd never felt before. Every order that came through was a win, and I felt like I was on the right track. But, as any entrepreneur will tell you, the early days were full of challenges. My first major obstacle came when I realized how much money I was losing on shipping. I priced my products affordably, but the shipping costs were eating into my margins. I had no idea how to navigate the logistics side of things, so I ended up losing more than I was earning. I started looking for cheaper alternatives for shipping, reaching out to different carriers and negotiating rates. Eventually, I found a solution that saved me a decent chunk of change, but it took months of trial and error. After a year of grinding, I'd made a modest profit, but I still wasn't anywhere near where I wanted to be. It wasn't until I hit a major turning point that things started to change. One night, after another frustrating day of struggling with inventory issues and customer complaints, I was scrolling through Instagram and stumbled upon a post from a well-known eco-influencer. She was sharing her love for sustainable products, and one of the brands she mentioned caught my attention. That brand's website was beautiful, their products were high quality, and their social media game was on point. I realized that I had to level up my branding if I wanted to stand out in this market. So, I made the decision to invest in a professional photographer to shoot my products and redesign my website. I also reached out to influencers in the sustainable living space, offering them free products in exchange for shoutouts. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The influencer posts began bringing in traffic, and my social media following grew rapidly. People started seeing my products as a legitimate brand, and sales began to skyrocket. But the growth didn't come without growing pains. As my orders increased, so did the pressure to keep up with inventory. I couldn't handle all the fulfillment by myself anymore, so I hired my first employee, a warehouse manager who helped with inventory, packaging, and shipping. It was a huge leap of faith, and honestly, I wasn't sure I could afford to bring someone on. But I knew it was necessary if I wanted to continue scaling. Thankfully, it was the best decision I made. With her help, I was able to focus on the business side of things, like marketing, partnerships, and product development. At this point, things were moving faster than I could keep up with. The orders were coming in at a steady pace, but I had no clue how to handle the financial side of things. I had to hire an accountant, a bookkeeper, and even a lawyer to help navigate contracts and trademarks. The more I learned about running a business, the more I realized how much I didn't know. But I was determined to figure it out. By the end of my second year in business, I had quadrupled my sales, expanded my product line, and developed partnerships with major eco-friendly influencers. My brand was starting to become recognizable, and I was getting a steady stream of inquiries from bigger retailers looking to carry my products. I was living my dream, but there was one problem. I was burned out. The constant hustle was taking a toll on me mentally and physically. I was tired, stressed, and questioning whether I could keep it up. I decided to take a break, a full 2 weeks off. I disconnected from everything. No emails, no social media, no work. I just spent time with my family and recharged. It was the best decision I could have made. When I came back, I had a fresh perspective. I realized that the key to scaling my business wasn't just about working harder. It was about working smarter. I needed to build systems, hire the right people, and delegate more. I started creating processes for everything: customer service, marketing, inventory management, and even packaging. As my team grew, I focused on fostering a company culture that prioritized innovation, sustainability, and customer experience. Fast forward to today, and my brand is now a well-known name in the sustainable home products industry. We're in multiple big-box retailers, and I've expanded into new markets around the world. I've even managed to create an internship program that helps young entrepreneurs get a foot in the door of the sustainable business world. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. The long nights, the stress, the sacrifices, they all led to this point. The best part? I now get to help others achieve the same success. I regularly speak at conferences, mentor new entrepreneurs, and share my story in the hopes of inspiring someone else to take that first step, just like I did all those years ago. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the journey isn't a straight line. You'll encounter setbacks, failures, and days when you question everything. But if you keep going, if you refuse to give up on your vision, you'll find success on the other side. Now, as I sit back and reflect on how far I've come, I'm proud of the company we've built. But even more than that, I'm proud of the person I've become. An entrepreneur who, despite all the odds, made it. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. I mean, I didn't even know the first thing about business. I was always that guy who'd rather work on the creative side, you know? Draw, design, write. But one fateful evening, everything changed, and I found myself unexpectedly stepping into the world of entrepreneurship. Here's how it all started. I was in my mid-20s, struggling to find stability after college. My degree in graphic design wasn't exactly leading to any life-changing job offers. I was working freelance, which was great for flexibility, but the work was inconsistent and low-paying. I barely scraped by, often living off ramen noodles and hoping my next gig would pay enough to cover rent. Despite being passionate about my craft, I started to lose faith in the whole follow your passion spiel. Then, one evening, while working on a logo design for a small business owner, I had an epiphany. As I was discussing their brand's vision and future goals, it hit me. This was more than just a design. This was about creating an identity, telling a story, and building something that could last. The moment I understood that, I realized that small business owners like this one were trying to do exactly what I was doing, making something out of nothing. They were all entrepreneurs, just like me. The only difference was they had a business to show for it, while I was still struggling to make ends meet. I was sitting at my desk, looking at my half-finished design, when I thought to myself, what if I could create something of my own? What if I could build a business? I know, it sounds cliché, but that thought was like a spark that ignited everything. But the real challenge was figuring out what I could offer. I didn't have much, but I had a talent for design and a decent understanding of marketing. So I decided to combine those skills and start my own graphic design agency, focusing specifically on branding for small businesses. It wasn't easy to start. I didn't have a network of clients or investors. I didn't even have a fancy office space. What I did have was determination and a willingness to hustle. I spent every free moment reaching out to local small business owners, offering them free consultations in exchange for the opportunity to work on their branding. The first few months were brutal. I didn't make any significant money, but I slowly started to build a portfolio. Every new project made me feel like I was one step closer to something bigger. There was a turning point about 6 months into the journey. I landed a big client, a local coffee shop that had recently opened. They wanted to rebrand and expand, and I offered them a complete branding package that included everything from logos to menus to social media templates. This project was huge. Not only did it give me a more professional portfolio, but it also helped me gain credibility in my local market. That coffee shop's new look was a hit, and it led to more clients reaching out to me. Slowly, the business began to grow. But like any entrepreneur, I ran into obstacles. The biggest one was managing everything on my own. I was wearing all the hats: designer, marketer, customer service rep, accountant. I was overwhelmed. At one point, I nearly burnt out. I remember working 16-hour days just to keep up with the increasing workload. I would wake up, work, and go to sleep. There was no balance, no time for anything else. It wasn't sustainable. That's when I realized I needed help. The problem was I didn't have a lot of money to hire full-time employees, so I had to get creative. I started outsourcing tasks that weren't in my area of expertise. I hired a part-time bookkeeper to handle finances and a virtual assistant to manage scheduling and emails. This freed up my time to focus on what I did best, designing and building the business. Around the same time, I stumbled upon an online course about scaling a service-based business. The course taught me strategies for pricing, client acquisition, and creating systems that would allow me to scale without sacrificing quality. I learned how to raise my rates without losing clients, and I learned how to target higher-paying clients who understood the value of good branding. This was a game changer. Instead of trying to take on as many clients as possible, I started working smarter, not harder. With my business growing, I had to face another challenge: marketing. It was tough to stand out in a crowded market. But I realized that my personal story could be my unique selling point. People love a good underdog story, and I had one. I began sharing my journey on social media, posting updates about my struggles, successes, and lessons learned. The response was overwhelming. People connected with me because I wasn't pretending to be something I wasn't. I wasn't some corporate guru. I was just a guy trying to make it work. It wasn't long before I began receiving inquiries from outside my local area. I had built enough of an online presence that my brand was attracting clients from all over the country. The next logical step was to expand my services to a wider audience. I started offering online courses on branding and design, which helped me generate passive income. It felt surreal to have people signing up for a course that I created, based on everything I had learned over the years. By the time I hit my 3rd year in business, I had a full-time team of 5 people, a steady stream of clients, and a much better work-life balance. I was no longer working 16-hour days, and I finally had time to enjoy life outside of work. I took weekends off, traveled, and even started a side project, a podcast about entrepreneurship and design. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From that struggling freelancer with no direction to a business owner with a thriving agency, it's been a wild ride. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of self-doubt, and obstacles I never saw coming. But every challenge was a lesson, and I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. So, what's the takeaway? If you have a passion or a skill, it's possible to turn that into something bigger. But it's not easy. You'll need grit, persistence, and a willingness to learn and adapt. Don't be afraid to ask for help, invest in yourself, and always stay true to your vision. Now, I'm not saying that starting a business will be the solution to all your problems, but if you're willing to put in the work, it can change your life in ways you never imagined. Just remember, start small, learn from your mistakes, And don't give up, even when things seem impossible. Because in the end, your success will be defined by how many times you've gotten back up after falling down. I started my journey as an entrepreneur a few years ago, but the road I've traveled to get here hasn't been smooth, and I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from my successes. Today, I own a company that generates six figures in revenue annually, but getting to this point has been anything but easy. It all began when I was 24. I had just graduated college with a degree in marketing, but I had zero interest in working for someone else. I knew I wanted to build something of my own. But the reality was, I didn't have the connections, resources, or even a concrete idea of what I wanted to do. I just knew that I couldn't work a regular 9 to 5 and be content. I dabbled in a few things at first. I tried dropshipping, selling random products online, and even started a small social media marketing agency that never really took off. I spent months perfecting my pitch and reaching out to potential clients, but I couldn't close any deals. In hindsight, I realized it was because I had no real value to offer. I was just another freelancer trying to make money without any real expertise. Then, during a late-night scroll on Reddit, I stumbled upon a post about an online course that promised to teach you how to launch your own e-commerce business. It seemed like one of those get-rich-quick schemes, but something about it caught my eye. I decided to invest in the course with the little savings I had. It was a big gamble, but I was desperate for a breakthrough. The course was comprehensive, covering everything from product research to creating an online store and even running ads. The most important lesson I learned was the value of solving a real problem for people. The e-commerce businesses that succeeded weren't just selling random products. They were addressing needs, providing solutions. I spent the next few months obsessing over product research. I was determined not to make the same mistake I had made with dropshipping, where I was selling items I thought would make money but didn't resonate with customers. I finally settled on a product, a specialized gym accessory that I thought had potential but wasn't widely available in the market. I built my website, set up my social media, and started running ads. But things didn't go smoothly. My first month of sales was dismal. I remember looking at my dashboard, seeing only a handful of orders, and feeling defeated. I had put everything into this venture, my savings, my time, my energy, and it wasn't working. I wanted to quit, but I didn't. Instead of quitting, I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to customers who had purchased my product to ask what they liked and didn't like. I ran a survey to get feedback on my website and product design. I spent hours learning how to improve my ad targeting. Slowly but surely, I started to see improvements. It wasn't overnight. In fact, it took almost a year before I saw consistent sales, but I didn't give up. Over time, my website began to rank better on Google, and word of mouth started to spread. I tweaked my marketing strategy, started collaborating with influencers, and even offered a referral program that gave customers a discount for referring their friends. As a result, sales began to climb steadily. The next major hurdle came when I realized I couldn't keep up with the demand on my own. My first hire was a virtual assistant to help with customer service and order fulfillment. Hiring someone felt like a massive leap of faith, but it was necessary. I was working 80 hours a week, and I was burning out. That was when I learned one of the most important lessons as an entrepreneur. You have to let go of certain tasks if you want to scale. I had to learn how to delegate and trust others to help me grow. I also learned that building a business wasn't just about the product. It was about building a team, establishing systems, and constantly improving everything you do. Fast forward 2 years, and I now have a small but dedicated team of people who help manage operations, marketing, and customer support. We've expanded our product line and even launched a subscription service for loyal customers. We've achieved a level of success I never thought possible, but it hasn't been smooth sailing. I've faced plenty of setbacks, including a supplier who went out of business, a failed marketing campaign that cost us thousands, and the time when a customer left a scathing review on every platform they could find. I've been scammed by vendors, made poor hiring decisions, and spent sleepless nights stressing about cash flow. However, I learned that failure is part of the process. Each setback was an opportunity to learn and improve. I adopted the mindset that success wasn't about avoiding mistakes, but about being able to recover from them and keep moving forward. And now, with a more stable business, I'm able to focus on long-term growth rather than surviving from day to day. There's no secret sauce to entrepreneurship. It's not about luck or knowing the right people. It's about persistence, learning from your failures, and continuously improving. It's about solving a real problem for people and finding a way to offer value in a unique way. I'm proud of what I've built, but I know that the journey isn't over. The world of e-commerce is constantly changing, and I need to stay adaptable. My biggest goal now isn't just making more money. It's creating a lasting impact, building a business that is sustainable and can continue to thrive long after I'm gone. For anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Start. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Don't worry about failure. Embrace it, learn from it, and keep going. It's going to be tough, and you'll question whether it's worth it. But trust me, when you hit those moments of success, when you see your hard work finally paying off, it will all feel worth it. In the end, the hardest part isn't building the business. It's building the mindset that you can make it work. Once you get that right, everything else falls into place. I'm a 25-year-old who recently turned my side hustle into a full-time business. The journey wasn't easy, but I want to share how I went from working a 9-to-5 job, barely making ends meet, to building a six-figure online business. Hopefully, it can inspire some of you who are on the fence about pursuing something on your own. To give you some context, I started out like most people, just a regular office worker grinding away in a cubicle. My job was decent, but I felt like I was stuck. I had no passion for the work I was doing, and while the pay was good enough to get by, I felt like I wasn't growing. I knew I was capable of more, but I didn't know exactly what that more was at the time. One evening, I was scrolling through Reddit, how fitting, right? When I stumbled upon a post about someone who started a dropshipping business and turned it into a full-time career. The idea of making money online sounded too good to be true, but the more I read, the more it intrigued me. This wasn't just some pipe dream, people were actually doing it. So, I did what any curious person would do. I Googled everything about dropshipping. I'm not going to lie, I went down the rabbit hole. I spent hours reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts. I absorbed everything I could about e-commerce, digital marketing, and business strategy. I even signed up for a few paid courses that promised to teach you the secrets to making six figures in your first year. I quickly learned that there's no secret formula. It was all about strategy, consistency, and adaptability. After a couple of weeks of research, I was hooked. I decided to give it a shot. At the time, I didn't have much money to invest, so I started small. I saved up $500 from my paycheck and invested it in a basic Shopify plan, a domain name, and a few products I thought would sell. I wasn't expecting instant success, but I figured I could learn as I went. If I failed, at least I'd have the experience. Building the store was harder than I thought. I spent days perfecting the website, creating product descriptions, and setting up my social media profiles. I had no background in design, so I had to rely on templates, and even those felt like a stretch. But I wasn't going to quit that easily. I poured my heart and soul into it. The first month was tough. I didn't make a single sale. The worst part? The doubts started creeping in. Was I wasting my time? Should I just focus on my day job? But I stuck with it. I realized that success wasn't going to come overnight, so I focused on learning from every mistake I made. I tried different ads, adjusted my product offerings, and worked on building my email list. Slowly but surely, things started to move. After about 2 months, I made my first sale. I remember looking at my phone in disbelief, $25. It wasn't much, but it was proof that my efforts weren't in vain. That small win gave me the confidence to keep going. Over the next few months, my sales started to grow. I reinvested the profits into better marketing strategies, hired a freelance designer to make my site look more professional, and expanded my product line. Then, something clicked. I was figuring out how to convert traffic into actual sales. My ads started to perform better, and I began to see a steady increase in customers. By the time 6 months had passed, I was making around $2,000 in profit every month. Not bad for a side hustle, but I still had my full-time job to balance. But at this point, I started to feel the strain. I was working 40 hours a week at my job, then spending another 20 to 30 hours on my business after hours. I was exhausted, and my social life took a hit. But I had a goal. I wanted to make this business my full-time job. I kept reminding myself that the sacrifices would pay off eventually. Then, in January of the next year, my business hit a tipping point. I launched a new product, a niche item that I had spent weeks researching. I had done all the right things, identified the target market, optimized my ads, and built anticipation through email marketing. The product went viral. Within 2 weeks, I was making $10,000 a month in sales. At that point, I knew I had to make a choice. My job wasn't going to allow me to scale my business further. So, I took the leap and quit my job. It was scary, but I had no choice. The business was growing faster than I could manage while working full-time, and if I didn't take the plunge, I'd never know how far I could go. Quitting my job was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was also the best. I threw myself into my business full-time. I hired a small team, a couple of people to handle customer service, a social media manager, and a product manager. We worked together to streamline operations and scale up the marketing. By the end of the year, my business had grown to a point where it was generating over $100,000 a month in revenue. I was making more money than I ever thought possible, and I had the freedom to work on my own terms. I didn't have to ask for vacation days, and I didn't have a boss breathing down my neck. I could focus on what mattered to me. But success didn't come without challenges. As my business grew, so did the competition. The market got saturated, and I had to continuously innovate and adapt. I spent hours studying new trends, improving my products, and staying ahead of the curve. I also faced plenty of setbacks from suppliers failing to deliver on time to marketing campaigns that flopped. But I kept going. Every failure was a lesson, and each victory made it all worth it. Today, my business continues to thrive. I've expanded into other product lines, and we're now shipping worldwide. I've been able to hire more staff and scale the company in ways I never imagined. I'm living a life I never thought possible, all thanks to taking that initial risk and diving into the world of entrepreneurship. Looking back, I realized that the key to success wasn't just about having the right product or knowing the perfect marketing strategy. It was about persistence, learning from failure, and having the courage to take risks. There were plenty of moments when I thought about quitting, when I felt overwhelmed, but pushing through those moments is what got me here. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I'll tell you this. It's not easy, but it's worth it. If I can do it, so can you. All it takes is the right mindset, a willingness to learn, and the ability to keep going, even when things get tough. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.